Has the Catholic Church's newest leader, Pope Leo XIV, already lost control of a major part of his flock just 6 weeks into his papacy? In a stunning turn of events, elements within the powerful German Catholic Church have begun to publicly define Pope Leo on their own terms, portraying him as a meek, moderate figure, while simultaneously declaring their intent to actively resist his leadership, just as they claim to have resisted popes for decades. This isn't merely a disagreement, it's a profound challenge to papal authority and the very unity of the global Church, unfolding barely a month after the smoke cleared from the Sistine Chapel. The question is, will Pope Leo XIV assert his authority, or will Germany's defiance shatter the fragile peace of his nascent pontificate? In the quiet corridors of the Vatican, amidst the swirling rumors and hopeful speculation that always accompany a new papacy, an intriguing narrative is being carefully crafted, particularly by media outlets connected to the German bishops. They are presenting Pope Leo XIV as a figure of measured calm, a moderate leader who shies away from dramatic, revolutionary changes, preferring instead a balanced, almost cautious approach to governance. This portrayal has been meticulously repeated across various news outlets and interviews, building a consistent and seemingly unshakable image of the Pope's character and leadership style. Yet, it's crucial to remember, it is still incredibly early in his pontificate, barely 6 weeks since his election, making it notoriously difficult to draw definitive conclusions about his long-term direction or theological alignment. Despite this early stage, certain individuals within the Church, including those who claim to have known him personally before his elevation, are offering surprisingly differing perspectives. While the official narrative emanating from some circles paints him as a quintessential moderate, others suggest a different truth, hinting that he may be more aligned with past leadership styles that lean towards significant and potentially transformative reforms. These contrasting views reflect a broader and deeply entrenched trend within the contemporary Church, where numerous groups, both progressive and traditional, are eager to define the new pope according to their own deeply held expectations, fervent hopes, or even anxieties. This anticipatory framing, whether intentional or not, risks boxing the Pope into a predetermined role before he has even had the chance to fully articulate his own vision. Amidst this atmosphere of eager anticipation and conflicting interpretations, the German bishops have taken a strikingly bold and, to many, provocative position. Even as they contribute to portraying Pope Leo as a calm, unthreatening moderate, they have simultaneously announced their unequivocal intention to resist certain aspects of his leadership, just as they claim to have done with a succession of previous popes, stretching back to the era of Pius XII. According to various reports, including statements from their own synodal path documents, they firmly believe the Church is in dire need of deep, fundamental, and transformative change, and they see themselves, the German hierarchy, as the appointed vanguard who must lead that effort, regardless of Roman directives. This audacious stance has immediately sparked intense debate across the global Church, raising profound concerns about unity, obedience, and the very nature of universal governance within the Catholic faith. It forces a direct confrontation between regional autonomy and papal authority. To bolster their narrative, and perhaps to soften the image of resistance, the German bishops have pointed to various media sources, including their official news outlets, which have highlighted specific anecdotes about Pope Leo. One article, widely circulated, featured comments from an Augustinian monk named Father Dominic. He described Pope Leo during a visit to their convent in Vienna when he was still a cardinal, as someone who listens attentively, speaks kindly, and interacts with people in a profoundly respectful and caring way. According to Father Dominic, the Pope is not a revolutionary figure, prone to dramatic pronouncements, but rather a man who approaches complex situations with diplomacy, compassion, and a genuine pastoral heart. This was evident, he noted, during the cardinals' visit to their convent, where the future pope took significant time to speak with the faithful, listened intently to their stories, and stayed much longer than expected, simply to be present with the people. This kind of testimony paints a beautiful and appealing picture of a gentle, approachable, and deeply pastoral pope. However, when placed alongside the larger, deliberately cultivated media narrative in Germany, which consistently emphasizes his moderation, it arguably becomes part of a broader, more strategic effort. This strategy appears designed to define Pope Leo in a very specific, almost constrained light, perhaps to preemptively manage expectations, or even to justify future divergences from Rome. Whether that carefully constructed image reflects the full, complex truth of his personality and intentions remains to be seen. What is clear, however, is that the conversation about his leadership and the various attempts to shape it has only just begun, setting the stage for a dramatic unfolding of events within the Church. During an interview, Father Dominic, the Augustinian monk, shared further personal accounts of his encounters with Pope Leo, stretching back to when he was still a cardinal. He vividly recalled a visit the future pope made to their convent in Vienna in November of the previous year. After celebrating the liturgy, Cardinal Leo did not leave immediately, as many high-ranking prelates might. Instead, he lingered, staying with the people, taking considerable time to speak with them individually, listening patiently to their concerns, and striving to connect personally. Father Dominic noted that this behavior was not unusual for him. It was consistent with how he had always interacted with others, marked by a genuine humility and a deep pastoral sensitivity. He also described the Pope's first public address following his election. According to Father Dominic, Pope Leo appeared deeply moved by the sheer number of people who had gathered to see him in St. Peter's Square. At one point, it seemed as though he was visibly holding back tears, genuinely touched by the overwhelming joy and warmth expressed by those present. Father Dominic believed that this was a clear, unmistakable sign of how seriously the Pope takes his immense responsibility to serve the Church, and how personally and profoundly he feels the immense weight of the moment, a weight of spiritual leadership for over 1 billion Catholics. He expressed unwavering confidence that Pope Leo would do his absolute best to face today's challenges with unwavering honesty, profound care, and a true shepherd's heart. When some describe Pope Leo as a moderate, what they often truly mean is that he possesses a calm, respectful, and encouraging tone in how he speaks and interacts with others, both privately and publicly. Unlike his predecessor, Pope Francis, who is widely known for using strong, at times even searing words to directly criticize certain groups or behaviors within the Church, often employing vivid, challenging metaphors, Pope Leo has adopted a distinctly different approach. For example, in a recent message addressed to priests worldwide, he focused almost entirely on thanking them for their dedicated service, expressing profound appreciation for their often unsung dedication and sacrifices, rather than offering corrections, sharp remarks, or calls for specific reforms. This marked difference in communication style has been widely noted by many observers, both within and outside the Vatican. Pope Leo appears to favor encouragement over confrontation, dialogue over division, and subtle persuasion over public rebuke. Still, it is critically important to remember that this observable communication style does not, by itself, tell us everything about his deeper leadership philosophy or his underlying theological and pastoral views. His more profound positions on church governance, doctrine, and the strategic direction of the universal church will undoubtedly become clearer over time, as he makes key appointments and addresses more contentious issues. Indeed, when it comes to decisions already made during his very short time in office, some choices have already sparked questions and generated quiet speculation. Among them is the case of Cardinal Victor Manuel Fernandez, who continues to serve as the highly influential head of the dicastery for the doctrine of the faith. Earlier, persistent rumors suggested that Pope Leo might remove him from this crucial role, perhaps to signal a shift in doctrinal emphasis or to address controversies that arose during Cardinal Fernandez's tenure under Pope Francis. However, no official statement or confirmation ever came from the Vatican. And as of now, Cardinal Fernandez firmly remains in his powerful position. Whether or not that will change in the coming months is something many inside and outside the Vatican are watching closely, and any developments on this front are widely expected to become clearer by the end of the summer, as the new pontificate solidifies its foundational leadership team. The continuity of this appointment is seen by some as a sign of Leo's moderation, by others as an indication of a more progressive alignment than initially thought. While some voices are emphasizing Pope Leo's calm and moderate tone, this portrayal has not been universally welcomed or embraced. In particular, certain powerful and influential voices within the Catholic Church in Germany appear deeply uneasy with this carefully cultivated image. Among them are several leading figures who have long advocated for dramatic, systemic changes within church teaching, its structures, and its very understanding of authority. One recent article, published on a prominent Catholic news platform covering Germany and Austria, highlighted the reaction of Cardinal Walter Kasper, a highly respected and influential German theologian. The headline referred to Pope Leo as a man of the middle, suggesting that the new pope is someone who doesn't fall clearly into either traditionalist or progressive camps, but rather occupies a nuanced, central space. According to the article, Cardinal Kasper views this perceived middle position as a profound strength, something that made Pope Leo an appealing and ultimately successful choice to many cardinals during the recent conclave. Cardinal Kasper noted that the Pope's ability to stay centered and balanced, to listen to diverse voices without immediately aligning with one side, allowed him to gain support from both conservative and progressive factions within the College of Cardinals. In a recent interview, he further explained that this quality could be precisely what is needed to bring greater unity to the Church, especially at a time when deep divisions and theological polarizations are widely felt across the globe. His comments subtly point to a growing concern within the Vatican and among discerning observers about the widening separation and often acrimonious relationship between different theological and pastoral approaches across the global Church. Cardinal Kasper, a highly experienced and respected figure, has served in several key positions during his long and distinguished career, including as president of the Pontifical Council for Promoting Christian Unity and as Bishop of the Diocese of Rottenburg-Stuttgart in southern Germany. He emphasized that Pope Leo possesses a unique ability to reconcile opposing sides and bring people together, a crucial role closely tied to the Pope's sacred mission to foster and safeguard unity within the universal Church. He expressed fervent hope that this gift for reconciliation would be central to Pope Leo's leadership, especially as tensions remain high on various contentious issues around the world, from doctrinal matters to pastoral practices. According to Kasper, the new pope also seems remarkably comfortable in today's digital age, demonstrating an ability to communicate effectively both in person and through modern digital platforms. These qualities, he suggested, may prove vital in helping him respond to the immensely complex and rapidly evolving challenges facing the Church today, enabling him to reach a broader audience and engage with contemporary culture. According to Cardinal Kasper, Pope Leo may indeed be the right leader for this specific, challenging moment in history, a shepherd capable of helping the Church heal its divisions and restore a sense of profound unity. Kasper also noted that Pope Leo is very familiar with modern life, not only enjoying everyday activities like driving himself, but also being remarkably comfortable with technology and digital communication, a stark contrast to some of his predecessors. These traits, he suggested, could help him connect with people across different generations and cultures, bridging gaps that often feel insurmountable. Kasper went on to compare Pope Leo to his immediate predecessor, Pope Francis, He explained that Francis had a distinctively different style of leadership, often described as more spontaneous, intuitive, and highly personal, often driven by immediate pastoral encounters. In contrast, Pope Leo tends to work in a more organized, methodical, and profoundly collaborative way, often relying on teamwork, careful planning, and established curial processes. This difference in approach, according to Casper, could significantly shape how the new pope manages the immense responsibilities of the Vatican and its various complex departments, potentially bringing a new sense of administrative order. He also mentioned that Pope Francis had faced past difficulties and sometimes outright clashes with the Roman Curia, often influenced by his direct experiences as Archbishop in Buenos Aires, where he encountered bureaucratic resistance. While some have taken Cardinal Casper's comments as a sign of optimism, heralding a period of constructive collaboration and healing, others are watching developments with extreme caution and even apprehension. What is undeniably clear is that leading figures among the German bishops have begun to voice their distinct opposition to Pope Leo's leadership, even though his papacy is still very much in its formative stages. According to multiple authoritative reports and public statements, they have declared their intention to actively resist him, just as they claim to have done with several popes in the past, stretching back to the 60s tumultuous era of World War II. This consistent, almost institutionalized pattern of resistance from the German hierarchy has drawn significant attention and considerable criticism from other parts of the global church. Historically, after the devastation of World War II, many German clergy and theologians expressed profound regret over their perceived past actions or inactions during the Nazi regime. This introspection often led them to advocate for major, even radical reforms within the church, believing a fundamental shift was necessary to prevent future complicity or silence in the face of injustice. Many scholars believe that this critical self-reflection and subsequent push for change played a highly significant role in shaping later church developments, including many of the progressive ideas that found expression at the Second Vatican Council. Since then, Germany has often been perceived as a vibrant, if sometimes controversial, center of theological innovation and change, sometimes welcomed as prophetic, but frequently debated and challenged by more traditional voices within the universal church. Recently, one prominent German theologian addressed this very situation directly in a scathing article that sharply questioned why nearly every recent pope seems to face strong disapproval, if not outright opposition, from significant parts of the German church. The article suggested that, based on Pope Leo's current known positions and his emerging personality, the church in Germany should brace itself for what could realistically be 2 decades of ongoing disagreement, if not open conflict, with Rome. Though the precise future remains inherently uncertain, these early signs strongly point to a continuing, potentially deepening divide between the Vatican and the powerful leadership of the German bishops. Some have suggested that Pope Leo could indeed lead the church for many years, possibly even 2 decades, given that he is still relatively young for a pope, turning 70 later this year. While he appears to be in good health, it's always important to remember that predicting the length of any papacy is never certain. His future as a leader will depend not only on the passage of time, but also, crucially, on how he responds with wisdom and strength to the many complex challenges that lie ahead. Meanwhile, a theologian named Bernhard Moisser, writing for a Catholic news outlet in Germany and Austria, offered a particularly strong and pointed criticism of what he perceives as the entrenched, almost habitual attitude among the German bishops. In his post, provocatively titled "Leo Deliver," he reflected on the initial wave of enthusiasm and hope that followed Pope Leo's election, but he quickly warned that after this hopeful beginning, the Pope would now need to show clearly and decisively where he stands, implying that anything less would be insufficient for the German demands. According to Moisser, The German bishops often display disappointment with nearly every pope, regardless of their background, personality, or pastoral approach. He painstakingly listed a series of past popes, noting how the German Church has repeatedly clashed with the Vatican's directives or expectations. He pointed out that Pope Francis, despite his perceived progressive leanings, was accused by some in Germany of allowing the Church there to weaken through inaction or insufficient support for their reform agenda. Before him, Pope Benedict XVI, who was German himself, paradoxically revealed what Mauser called the theological poverty of his homeland through his more traditional theological stance, which often felt at odds with prevailing German thought. St. John Paul II, according to Mauser, directly challenged the cultural norms and liberal theological currents in Germany, especially on sensitive matters of morality and the human body, leading to significant friction. Mauser even included Pope John Paul I, who died just a month into his papacy, sarcastically noting that he wasn't around long enough to change the direction of German opinion. He continued by mentioning Pope Paul VI, forever known for Humanae Vitae, a landmark document on the sanctity of life and family, which faced strong and vocal resistance in Germany. Mauser even referenced Pope John XXIII, often seen as a symbol of openness and reform, suggesting that if more people had truly read his spiritual writings, rather than just his encyclicals, they might have a different, more traditional understanding of his profound devotion. His overall biting point was clear. The German bishops have not been easily satisfied with any pope in recent memory, often expecting even greater, more changes than what Rome was willing to offer. In light of this deeply rooted history, Mauser argued that the Church in Germany has frequently, and sometimes deliberately, taken a distinct path from Rome. Especially in the aftermath of World War II, many of the groundbreaking changes and influential theological movements that shaped the Church in the second half of the 20th century indeed originated from German thinkers, universities, and institutions. While these efforts were sometimes seen as genuinely progressive and necessary adaptations to the modern world, they also frequently led to tension and direct clashes with more traditional voices and with the central authority of the Vatican. Today, this historical trajectory continues as the German bishops have unequivocally signaled their intention to continue promoting their own ambitious vision for the Church, famously known as the Synodal Way. This sweeping effort includes major, potentially transformative proposals for change, such as altering how bishops are chosen, fundamentally reforming how priests are formed in seminaries, and radically redefining who holds authority in local dioceses, potentially empowering lay-led councils far beyond current canon law. These are not small adjustments. They represent a significant structural shift in how the Church would function in practice, challenging millennia of tradition. And for now, it appears the German leadership is determined to move forward with these proposals, whether there is full agreement or explicit approval from Rome. One of the most debated and controversial parts of the German Synodal Way involves a profound redefinition of the role of leadership within the Church. Some of the proposals would significantly shift decision-making authority away from bishops and towards lay-led councils, fundamentally altering the hierarchical structure of governance. In this proposed model, priests and bishops would primarily focus on celebrating the sacraments, their spiritual and liturgical functions, while key administrative, financial, and even some pastoral responsibilities could be largely taken on by lay people. These proposals would mark a truly significant, even revolutionary, change in how the Church is governed, particularly at the local parish and diocesan level, effectively creating a parallel system of authority. In addition to these dramatic leadership changes, the German process has also proposed significant reforms regarding who is allowed to preach during Mass. Some resolutions passed by the German Synodal Way explicitly support the idea of allowing women, and potentially lay men, to deliver homilies and publicly proclaim the gospel during liturgical celebrations, roles that are currently strictly reserved for ordained clergy in the Roman Rite. These and other highly contentious suggestions, including a radical call to reconsider long-standing church teachings on sexual morality and gender identity, have been thoroughly discussed and formally passed during synodal sessions in Germany. At the time these resolutions emerged, the Vatican's response under Pope Francis was not a direct, outright rejection, which many had anticipated. Instead, it was a more cautious note, encouraging the German bishops to proceed slowly, with prudence, and crucially, in unity with the global Church, signaling a desire to avoid a formal schism. However, in the weeks following the election of Pope Leo, some leaders in Germany have continued to express their unwavering intention to move forward independently with their reforms, regardless of Roman caution. This has led to renewed criticism, including from respected theologians within Germany itself, who question whether such an independent, almost defiant approach is appropriate or sustainable for a church that prides itself on universality and papal primacy. A recent article from an official church news platform in Germany addressed this very issue, specifically focusing on the role of women in the church. It highlighted how, despite many women holding increasingly important administrative and pastoral roles, the church is still often perceived and experienced as fundamentally male-dominated. The article included reflections from a prominent theologian who pointed out what she described as everyday signs of inequality that reinforce this perception. She gave tangible examples, such as separate restrooms near the altar that are designated only for men, or storage spaces in sacristies meant exclusively for priests, implying these are not just practical arrangements, but symbols of deeper issues about visibility, access, and inherent power dynamics. According to her, women may often organize, assist, and even sustain much of church life through their tireless work, but men are still consistently the ones who celebrate the sacraments, speak authoritatively from the pulpit, and make key decisions that shape the church's future. She argued that this dynamic, while rarely explicitly written in official church teaching, is often profoundly experienced in everyday practice, creating a sense of exclusion for many women. To challenge this pervasive dynamic, various progressive groups, such as the German Catholic Women's Association, have organized highly visible initiatives, such as Women Preachers' Day, where women are explicitly invited to speak from the pulpit during liturgical services as a public sign of shared baptismal dignity and active participation in the Church's teaching mission. These actions are meant to express not only a profound call for greater equality, but also a fundamental shift in how leadership, ministry, and service are understood within the Church. Supporters of the initiative argue that proclaiming the gospel and sharing theological reflections should not depend solely on clerical status, but on a willingness to serve, to teach, and to actively include others, thereby creating a more welcoming and representative church. This approach reflects a broader framework that some have described as a keen focus on power structures within the church. It's a way of looking at church life that seeks to understand precisely who holds influence, who is visible, who is heard, and who is allowed to participate in decision-making and public ministry. Some observers have noted that this analytical framework draws heavily from ideas that are also used in modern social theory and critical theory, which rigorously attempts to identify and challenge perceived imbalances of power in various institutions across society. While these ideas have sparked significant interest and enthusiasm in some parts of the Church, particularly in Germany, they have also raised serious questions and concerns, among others, about whether such models fully align with traditional Catholic teaching regarding divine institution, hierarchy, and the sacramental nature of holy orders. The broader global synodal process on synodality, initiated by Pope Francis, has also explored similar themes, including the critical importance of listening, inclusion, and shared responsibility among all the baptized. However, opinions differ sharply on how far these changes should or can go without altering the fundamental nature of the Church. Many observers have noted that a significant portion of the recent discussions within parts of the Church, especially in Germany, are heavily shaped by a way of thinking focused almost exclusively on systems of power and influence. This approach meticulously looks at church structures, leadership roles, and various ministries through the lens of who holds authority and who is excluded from it. While examining how power operates can certainly be helpful in certain contexts, critics point out that when it becomes the only or even the primary focus, it can lead to confusion about the Church's divinely ordained mission, its core teachings, and its spiritual identity. This type of analysis, rooted in secular academic and social movements, often studies differences between individuals and groups based on gender, class, age, or position in society. The profound concern for many faithful Catholics is that this same method is now being rigorously applied to deeply spiritual church structures, effectively transforming theological questions into purely political or sociological ones. Some church leaders and theologians believe this analytical shift has significantly contributed to growing divisions, especially when traditional Catholic teachings are re-examined or even dismissed through modern ideological filters. In the intense lead-up to the last papal conclave, many within the German Church were moving quickly and assertively, actively promoting the changes they felt were absolutely necessary for the Church's survival and relevance. After the conclave concluded and Pope Leo XIV was unexpectedly elected, some reports described tangible disappointment among the German bishops. It seemed clear that they had hoped for a different outcome, perhaps a pontiff who aligned more closely and more immediately with the sweeping reforms they were proposing. The ongoing tension, therefore, appears to center around several core, fundamental questions that strike at the heart of Catholic identity. Who truly holds authority in the Church? Who may speak authoritatively during the liturgy and in doctrinal matters? How should ancient Church teachings, especially on morality and sexuality, be interpreted and applied in today's rapidly changing world? Some groups have explicitly suggested that unless these things are redefined to their satisfaction, they do not feel fully included or truly belong within the Church. Others vigorously argue that the Church already provides a rightful and welcoming place for everyone, but within a structure that is inherently spiritual in nature, divinely instituted, and built upon millennia of sacred traditions and apostolic succession. There are also robust discussions among some historians and theologians about how past movements have subtly, or not so subtly, influenced current thinking about church reform. A few scholars compare modern reform efforts to earlier historical theories, such as the idea that the Church underwent a dramatic and fundamental transformation after the Roman Emperor Constantine legalized Christianity in the 4th century. According to this view, an early pristine simplicity of the Church was gradually replaced by more formal, elaborate structures, complex rituals, and a centralized institutional control, marking a departure from its original evangelical roots. This perspective is highly debated and certainly not universally supported by all scholars, but it continues to influence certain conversations about radical reform in modern times. Some groups, yearning for what they perceive as lost authenticity, have expressed a deep desire to return to what they see as the original, uncorrupted ways of the early Church. They often cite early Christian writings, like the Didache, to support their proposals. However, critics vehemently argue that these references are sometimes taken out of context, misunderstood, or selectively applied without sufficient historical or theological nuance. For example, one church writer from the early centuries once described receiving the Eucharist in the hand, a practice that existed in various forms. Yet, later guidance from church leaders, out of reverence for the Blessed Sacrament and a desire for uniformity, discouraged this practice over time. The Church, through its living tradition, developed clearer teachings and practices to preserve both profound reverence for the sacred and essential unity among the faithful. Many reform-minded thinkers today point to seminal events like the Second Vatican Council, 1962 to 1965, as moments of profound renewal and rediscovery. They truly believed that the visionary leaders during that time, including key figures in theology and liturgy, helped to revive a more authentic, communal, and pastorally engaged expression of the Catholic faith, shedding outdated rigidities. Supporters of these ideas often suggest that the Church is still very much in the ongoing process of rediscovering and implementing its earliest, most authentic roots, a continuing process of aggiornamento. As for Pope Leo XIV himself, views remain decidedly mixed, contributing to the uncertainty. Some who knew him before his election describe him as more progressive in style and thinking, signaling potential openness to significant change. Others, however, insist he is firmly traditional, a staunch defender of established doctrine and practice. With only 6 weeks in office, it is undeniably still far too early to definitively define his papacy in one direction or the other. Much will depend on the crucial appointments he makes in the months ahead, the key advisors he surrounds himself with, and how he chooses to respond to the many powerful voices and competing visions that are actively shaping the Church's future. As of now, Pope Leo has only been in office for a fleeting 6 weeks, a blink of an eye in the vast sweep of Church history. Millions are still waiting patiently, and perhaps anxiously, to see what concrete direction he will take, especially through his upcoming appointments to critical Vatican dicasteries and his initial major decisions. These will likely offer a much clearer picture of his leadership style, his theological priorities, and his strategic vision for the universal Church. In the meantime, discussions and debates within the Church continue with vigor, and new developments are expected that may further clarify the profound challenges and opportunities that lie ahead. One of the most pressing and potentially explosive questions involves the ongoing, highly assertive German synodal way. The bishops of Germany have been unequivocally clear in their call for major systemic reforms, and they continue to present Pope Leo as a moderate figure, perhaps to frame his potential resistance as a deviation from their perceived spirit of dialogue. In their view, the Church doesn't need mere moderation. It needs bold, courageous, and even revolutionary change to remain relevant in the modern world. Because of this deeply held conviction, they are pushing forward with their own sweeping proposals, which include radically restructuring leadership roles, fundamentally rethinking liturgical participation to include non-ordained individuals, and controversially revisiting long-standing moral teachings on sexuality and gender. At the same time, Pope Leo XIV has emphasized the theme of unity far more frequently and prominently than even his predecessor, Pope Francis, who often spoke of it during his pontificate. From the moment he appeared on the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica after his election, his first words echoing his commitment to brotherhood, Pope Leo has made unity a central, defining theme of his papacy. In a deeply divided Church and a fragmented world, maintaining unity may indeed require an incredibly careful, balanced, and nuanced approach. But this also raises a crucial, existential test for his leadership. Can the Pope truly remain a figure of profound unity while still effectively addressing the serious tensions and potential ruptures caused by the far-reaching reforms proposed in Germany, particularly when those proposals touch upon core questions of doctrine and authority? Many believe this moment, this delicate balancing act, will ultimately define his papacy and shape his legacy. The German synodal way has introduced some of the most far-reaching and challenging reform proposals seen in the Catholic Church in recent years, pushing boundaries that have historically led to direct Roman intervention. In comparison, the broader global synodal process on synodality, despite its emphasis on listening and inclusion, seems much more cautious and fundamentally moderate in its scope and proposed outcomes. As these parallel and sometimes conflicting discussions continue to unfold, observers worldwide are watching closely to see how Pope Leo will respond, especially when directly faced with clear disagreements about doctrine, the nature of authority, and the very identity of the Church. In this time of profound uncertainty, intense debate, and palpable tension, many are calling for widespread prayer. Prayer for the Church, for its unity, for divine wisdom to guide its leaders, and for true peace among all the faithful. It's important to remember that these complex conversations are not just about abstract policies or rigid positions. They are about people, about individuals and communities seeking to serve the Church as they understand it, often with deep conviction and sincere faith. For that very reason, even amid disagreement, the fundamental call to Christian charity and mutual respect remains paramount. Historically, the German Church has undergone immense periods of transformation, particularly after the profound trauma of World War II. While none of today's German bishops were active during the war itself, many were deeply shaped by teachers, mentors, and spiritual directors who lived through those incredibly difficult times, experiencing firsthand the collapse of society and the moral challenges to the Church. The trauma of that period had a deep and lasting impact on German society and, consequently, on the German Church, and it may help explain why so many reform movements later took root and flourished in that particular part of the world. The influence of German theology and philosophical thought continues to profoundly shape debates within the wider Church today, often serving as a catalyst for discussion. As this new, pivotal chapter unfolds, much remains uncertain, and the path ahead is fraught with challenges. But one thing is undeniably clear: the global Church is at a crossroads, with strong, passionate voices on all sides, each believing they hold the key to its future. The direction it takes will depend crucially on the choices made by its leaders, the fervent prayers of its faithful, and a shared, overarching commitment to the pursuit of truth in charity and the preservation of genuine unity in Christ. What do you believe is the most critical challenge Pope Leo XIV faces in bridging the divide between the Vatican and the German Church? And what steps, if any, do you think he should take? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe for more insights into the unfolding dramas of the Catholic Church.